Well, Haley, when I think about myself and try to describe myself to myself,
This is something
really
you practice often?
Well, sometimes, yes. And I think of all the adjectives that I could use. Bold is really high up on the list, don't you think? You know me a little bit. Am I one of those bold leaders of people? We know I'm not, don't we?
I would call you eccentric.
Yes, I'm eccentric. I'd love to think of myself as bold, but that's not the case. You're listening to the Repcolite Home Improvement Show, sponsored by Benjamin Moore. I'm your bold host, Dan Hansen. And Haley's over there.
Was I supposed to have a word?
You're supposed to say your name.
Well, I'm Haley Johnson.
And there's Haley Johnson. Yes. Here we are. Bold. That's. I had a point for all of that, Haley. You derailed me when you didn't jump in with your name. Anyway, I'm not terribly.
Like I should have something. Like now I want an adjective.
Oh, you want an adjective?
My name.
Maybe
if you're bold Dan Hansen, who am I?
I don't know. You're slow to respond. I'll
Fair
give
enough.
you that.
Yeah.
But anyway, bold. I had a point with that.
Yes.
When I think about decisions I make, I know the running joke amongst my friends is that very few of them are bold. I just don't jump into things like that. I'm very cautious. I like to think things through. I read a lot of reviews when I make an Amazon purchase. But something that I have been bold in, and it's burned me in the past, is color choices. I work with paint, so I figure I'm going to just jump right in, make some big choices. And
you're not afraid to make mistakes because you know that you can paint over them.
And I know that I've made so many mistakes that, yes, you get used to making mistakes after a while, and you kind of miss it when you get things right every single time. So, yeah, I'm not afraid of mistakes. I've jumped into bold colors. And I've always thought this is going to just be perfect. I've seen pictures. I've seen all of this. And then it just doesn't work. You had a really interesting experience with a friend of yours. She actually made the show last week.
I feel a little bad, like I'm picking on Amber.
Well, trust me, after last week's talk about how she stained the couch with chocolate that she melted, this is way easier than that. Yeah. But talk about Amber. She's doing some repainting.
Yes, she is painting her house right now, and it's very exciting for her. This is the first time that she's had the ability to put colors on the wall that she has picked, right? She's always lived in rentals, and so they've always been like builder beige. And this is a very creative person. She's an art teacher. She makes her own art. And she uses a lot of color. Now, you wanted an adjective at the very beginning of the show. Maybe we could say Haley is giving and kind, because Amber is doing this because of a kind of a unique Christmas present from you. Well, I knew that she's been really wanting to paint, and it's just not in the budget right now. And so I thought, I'm going to give her paint for Christmas, because it's hard to live in a space that you can't fully make your own. Yeah. And I really appreciate the value of that. I'm a person that's been lucky enough to live in a lot of spaces where I have been able to paint, and I know the effect it has on my mood. It's, it sounds a little dramatic, but No. I think it's really interesting because we're going to get to the bigger point, and that's decorating with color and how do you do it. But it's something we talk about pretty much every Christmas, give the gift of paint. And it is a good idea. I know that deep down, but now you've literally done it. And she actually called it her... the best Christmas present ever. Yeah. Like the best possible present she could have ever gotten. Because paint color has so much of an effect on how we feel in our spaces. And we spend so much time in our spaces. Right. And I think that we spend so much more time in our spaces when we like them. We certainly spend happier time when we like them. So anyway, Amber's got this great big gift of paint from Haley, the all-giving, all-kind Haley. And Amber kind of reached out to you for some color help. And I know how this kind of went, but walk the listeners through it, because I'm sure there are people out there who are going to really resonate with this experience. Well, last time I think we talked about how I have done color consulting in the past, right? And I helped my friend Ginger last time pick out some colors for a new build. And I was a little hesitant to help Amber pick colors. How come? Because she's also an artist and she works with color, and she's got a very specific vision for her space. She has always picked very playful decor to begin with, and her art is, I would say, bold.
Okay.
Like in color
like
choice.
Dan bold? Like bold like I am? Or
maybe not like you bold,
okay,
because
not
that's
quite
hard to
that
match.
bold. It is.
Yeah.
It is. It's a standard that's pretty high.
Exactly.
But it's still pretty bold. So Amber's
Yes.
doing pretty good.
She's just, yeah, it's very playful colors. Like she described like Nickelodeon. Like
Sure.
think of Nickelodeon colors. That's what I want. Like
For her
Pee-wee's
room.
Playhouse. Like,
And that's what she wanted
just-
in her home.
Yes.
I would never, ever have taken the phrase Pee-wee's Playhouse.
Yeah.
Especially with my height being what it is. Can you imagine?
Oh my gosh.
I'd never live that down.
Nope, you would
but anyway, she's thinking she wants something really fun, exciting,
Yes.
playful.
And she's been looking at pictures, on Instagram and Pinterest and getting ideas. And she's seen these really bold, bright colors work,
Well,
in quotations in these spaces.
Well, right. And I know part of that is she even referenced the Benjamin Moore Colors of the Year.
Right.
That whole palette.
It's very bold. Very bright colors. I think a lot of people are really surprised when they saw the 2023 color palette.
Mm-hmm.
It is quite I don't know.
It's a step outside
Yeah.
of the norms, that's for sure. Because
Yeah.
normally there's one or two colors that kind of can take the spotlight, in the sense that they're bold and they're
Right.
strong and all of that. This one, man, everything feels like it's pushing the boundaries. Not quite everything, but there's a lot of
Yeah,
color
pretty
that's
much
pushing the boundaries.
everything. Yeah.
Okay.
Because you're right in that mostly the other, color of the year palettes have been like one strong color, and then there's a lot of supporting actors, right?
Right.
That are just kind of like in the background, and they're making this other color look really nice.
Yeah, there's a Dan
Right.
color, and then there's all the little Haleys that kind of
Exactly.
just fill in the gaps behind the full-on star. But this time, the whole palette is Dan.
Yes. All Dans. That's
It's
a lot.
Pretty tough to take,
That's a lot.
right? So we saw that color palette come out, and that came out in October,
Right.
last October.
Right.
And we weren't big fans. Now, we spent some time. We'll put a link in the show notes
Right.
to the segment where we talked about it. And there are some takeaways. And it's,
Yes.
one of the takeaways is that it really challenges you to step outside of your comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
We're not saying step out necessarily into those
Right,
colors that are in that palette, but you can work with them.
Yeah.
Well, Amber saw that.
Right.
And I know that because you and her went back and forth a little bit, but she had seen pictures where these bold colors worked. And she even used that as an excuse or an example
An example.
to push herself into these. She said, it looks great here.
Right.
Why won't it be great in my space?
Yeah, and I think this is the trick of color. It's hard to explain to people because it's not like anything else that we experience in life, really. When we see colors on a phone picture or a magazine, wherever we're seeing it, and it's just a picture, that's a very small scale image that we're seeing. And it can look really nice as an image, just like a piece of art with really vibrant, bright colors can look beautiful as a piece of art that's just contained into this frame, right?
Sure.
Experiencing those colors is a completely different thing. Living in them, it's like I appreciate the sun, but
Yeah.
I don't want to live on the surface of it.
I
right?
think, that makes sense. I think people can appreciate our podcast and our radio show. But spending 24 hours a day with me,
Sure.
you spend a lot more time with me.
Yeah.
I'm high
and
energy.
I need breaks.
Yeah, you need breaks. Definitely. You can't have all day and all the time. Nobody. That's why God invented sleep, literally for me, so I get a break from it as well. But anyway, that makes a lot of sense, but it is so tough to understand that.
Right. And it's especially tough because it's not something that we do in our daily lives very often. I think,
colors?
Right,
Okay.
exactly. And then make them big, right? Maybe we pick a crayon color or a marker or a paint color for a small, contained space. But picking a color and then making it as large as a room is not something that we experience very often.
So let's talk about what Amber did.
Yeah.
Now we're at about 10 minutes. So I don't know how much further you want to go with this. Do you want to take a
Maybe
break?
catch it on the other side.
All right, let's quick set. Yeah, I guess let's do that right now. Let's
Yeah.
take a break right now. And then when we come back, we'll set up what Amber did, what she chose.
Yep.
And then Haley's got some ideas for how you can get bold colors.
Right.
But without burning your eyes out of your head.
Yes.
So I'm kind of tipping their hand. Amber went a
sorry.
little far. But she's back now.
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll take a break, and we'll be back with the Repcolite Home Improvement Show in just a minute. Stick around. we're back. You're listening to the Repcolite Home Improvement Show. I'm Dan Hansen.
I'm Haley Johnson, and I'm telling another story about my friend Amber.
Yeah. It's a nicer story, though, and
Yes.
if you don't listen every week, you have no idea what we're talking about, but just to be polite and let everybody in on the inside joke, last week we talked about a steamer that
Yes.
Haley has that cleaned out a couch, a white fabric couch,
Right.
that Amber was visiting, and she brought a little handful of Andes mints with her and forgot that she had them, melted them on the couch. She got up from the couch and looked at all the melted
Revealed
chocolate.
The melted chocolate.
Haley had some very colorful explanations for how she
How it
described
looked.
and what it looked like. But anyway, it was all cleaned up. The steamer was
Yes.
great and saved the day.
It did.
And we've got links in last week's show notes if you want to check out that steamer in case you have people who come over and like Andes mints as well. Anyway, that's what we're talking about. So Amber was the star of that episode last week.
Yep.
Right now we're talking about some color choices that Amber made.
Right.
Painting, I think, a dining room to start
Yes,
with.
She started with the dining room, and let's just get to the colors that she picked.
She wanted to go bold.
She wanted to go bold. You know, she likes very playful color palettes,
Yeah.
right? I described her as an art teacher. She's an artist. She uses a lot of color in her own work.
Sure.
Now, keep in mind, her work is small, right? We're looking at small scale things normally, and that looks great on that scale.
You're sucking up because you feel bad about last week.
I feel bad.
Amber's cool with it. She's going to roll with it.
The colors she picked for the room are colors that she would have picked for her art.
What were they?
Really bright pink, like a bubblegum pink.
Mm-hmm.
And then like a bright orange, really.
Yep. See, I don't have any connection to Amber. I've met her, and I like Amber.
Yes.
But yeah, that's a tough color combination to put together. I get it, though. I appreciate it that people want to push boundaries. I started last segment talking about how I've pushed boundaries. I went with lime greens when that was really important or popular.
Yep, totally
not
did that when I
important.
was 16.
Yeah, I was much older than that and should have been wiser. So I completely get it. But
Yeah.
Amber went with those colors. And I know that you initially pushed back a little bit because she was seeking your input. And I know Amber countered with, well, I've seen all these colors in Benjamin Moore's
And this is
Color
what
of
I
the Year
want.
palette.
You know, she
Right.
wanted something that was bolder because she also
I should clarify. Hold on. I said
Yeah.
that she saw all those colors in the
Oh,
palette.
yep.
That's not accurate. She didn't see those exact colors in the palette.
Right.
She saw bold colors being used in the palette, and
Yeah.
it kind of gave her the strength or the comfort,
Yeah.
the courage to jump in.
forward.
But the problem with seeing it in pictures is what we talked about last time, is in a picture it's small scale. When you see it in a room, you're immersed in it. It's
Yes.
large scale, and colors really get overpowering fast.
They change dramatically, and it's hard to really understand unless you've experienced that for yourself, I think, sometimes. And it can be hard when you're Amber coming into the store and you have this idea of what you want and you pick these bold colors, and someone tells you, you might want to step it down a notch because you think that you have this vision of what that's going to look like. And unfortunately, our brains are just not the best at translating from color chip to entire room.
There's so many things going on. When I worked in the store, I would have a lot of people come in, and I remember yellow. Yellow was really big back then, and they would pick out yellows. And, you know, think about a color chip. Everybody at home, think about a color chip, and the typical color chips will have a lighter version of the
Right.
color on the top, and it works its way down to a really dark version.
Right.
So people would pick that middle yellow. I remember that. And I would have that conversation. That is really going to be strong.
It's like a lemon yellow
It's
at that
really,
point.
really bright. You
Yeah.
know, there's a lot of power with yellow, and once you see it on your walls, it's really going to be strong. No. I want it to be strong, and I'll point at a lighter yellow. You know, one of the ones high up on the chip, one of the first ones. No, I don't want that. That's an off-white. Well, finally, I would start getting those chips, and I would hold them against printer paper.
Sure,
you know,
yeah.
white printer paper, and instantly people would realize that top color, which they think of, because when we look
'cause
at a
in
chip,
comparison to the other yellows on the chip, it does look like an off-white.
seems like an off-white,
Right.
right? When you see it against yellow or against a white paper,
Yeah.
you realize how much color is already in that top part of the
Yes.
chip. So that throws people off.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just the whole thing. We're not used to making some of those choices. When you're choosing a tan and you end up with a darker tan versus a lighter tan, it's not the end of the world.
Right, exactly. Like, that's not such a dramatic mistake. But going with bright colors like the pink and the orange and taking that to its limit, you know, she basically needed to wear sunglasses when she entered the room after painting this. It was really intense.
Right. So now we've set up the problem, and the problem, I think everybody's experienced it, or at least can now envision what we're talking about. How do you avoid it? And how do you avoid it without going to just neutrals and being safe all the time? How do you still push the boundaries? How do you use some of the Benjamin Moore colors from the Color of the Year or something like that and not end up having to repaint 16 times?
Well, I think always trying to, even if you're looking for, I want color, starting with a palette like the Historic Collection, those colors are going to look super dull to you in comparison to some of the other Benjamin Moore color palettes, like the Color Preview, which has been having a big push right now because it does contain a lot of those really bright, bold colors. But I would say start with something muted and work your way up from there.
So the Historic palettes, those are going to be more muted.
Exactly. They're going to have more gray. They're going to be toned down. And they work in almost every space because they've been designed from someone's eye, not from a computer. This isn't an algorithm that created the color. Literal eyes from a human made this color, and they made it to scale well, to do its job well. And that's not the case for every color. So starting with one of those designer palettes like the Historic Collection, like the Affinity Collection, is a great place to start. And then you can kind of move more colorful from there. But that's a great starting point.
So they're going to find plenty of color in those.
Exactly.
It's just going to be a little more muted, and it's gauged or made to scale. You can find those at any Repcolite location. You can find them online, all of that. BenjaminMoore.com, you can find those palettes right there that way. So start with that. Anything else that you've got for people?
Sample.
We talk about that all the time, but I know with bold colors, you're pushing it a little further than the normal sampling.
Right.
Let's talk about normal sampling quickly, and then show the difference with some of these colors.
I think normal sampling, people paint, like a 2x2 foot square on the wall and call it good.
Right. You can buy Benjamin Moore color half sample or half pint samples. Yeah. They're not half samples. It's a full sample in a half pint. So I think they're right around $5, something like that. Yeah. A really inexpensive way to get the color, brush it on the wall and take a look at it. And like Haley's saying, you're doing like a 2x2 square. Yep. Getting a nice view of it that way. When we're talking about some of these bolder colors,
I would say paint an entire wall if you can, or as big as you can possibly go with that half pint sample and still doing 2 coats. Because the other thing with these bright colors is that they're going to need more coats than something that is more muted. They don't have as many of the nice natural pigments in them that hide really well. They're going to use synthetic pigments, and those are not going to hide as well. You're probably going to do more coats of paint than you really want to do, but that's what it takes to get those bright colors.
Right. Now, I think there's going to be a number of people thinking right now, well, okay, so I'm going to brush all these bright colors on my wall. I'm going to do a whole wall, 2 coats. What if I hate it and I've got to cover over it? Isn't that tough to do? Well, if you're just going to buy it straight without sampling it, you're still going to be painting over it if you don't like it. So it's really, at that point, it's still a win.
$5 investment is going to say you might be investing more time into the process, but I promise you the time is well spent.
I think an in-between step before you're brushing the samples out and after you've checked some of these more muted palettes is to really have a full-on conversation with people in a store at Repcolite. We've got color experts in the stores who really will give you some straight up advice and, expert opinions based on what we've seen, not just what we know, but what we've seen, where people take similar colors home and they come back. We see it all the time. That was really, I mentioned the yellow conversations I'd have with customers. A lot of those were based on the fact that I've had other conversations with other customers with the same types of yellows, where the next day I'm selling them a lighter version or white paint so they can mix it together.
Exactly.
People will give you some really straight up advice when you come to a paint store that really spends a lot of energy and focus on being a good color store, like the Repcolite stores will. So stop out, listen to that advice. That will help you.
Absolutely.
Then do that sampling. You got about a minute. Anything else?
I really want to harp on the sampling, I guess.
Okay.
As big as you can go, because what our eyes aren't able to do is just focus on that color when it's small and it's surrounded by other things. So painting that 2x2 square on the wall isn't really enough to give our eyes the ability to experience that color. And it's because averaging all of the other colors in the room at that point still, and it's changing our literal perception of that color. So you're not actually seeing it for what it is until you're able to get it large enough to block out all the other colors in the room.
Right. Think of people in the Titanic. They love their glass of water, but being surrounded by water, completely different. Anyway, on that note, that's all the time we've got. We're going to wrap it up. If you want to catch this episode again, you can find it online at repcolite.com. I'm Dan Hansen.
I'm Haley Johnson. Thanks for listening.